The room erupted in polite applause as Victoria took the stage. She adjusted the collar of her blazer, accepted the crystal plaque from the COO, and flashed that perfectly practiced smile, head tilted just enough to show humility, but not enough to hide the pride glowing behind her eyes. For her innovative work in operational efficiency that will save this company over $4 million annually, the announcer declared, as the audience clapped louder. I sat in the second row, right side. Close enough to hear every word. Close enough to watch her bask in the recognition for work that wasn't hers. My work. The algorithm they were celebrating? I wrote the first lines of code in my apartment over a weekend. I ran the projections. I presented the data. I built the pilot model. Victoria had dismissed it as not viable in our very first meeting. But no one in this room knew that. Not yet. She stepped up to the podium, motioned toward the slideshow I had been asked to manage as part of the tech team for the ceremony, and launched into a vague speech about thinking differently and leading with vision. When she reached the slide labeled Process Modeling Overview, she hesitated. A perfect cue. I raised my hand. Victoria, would you mind walking us through the regression structure behind the fallback module for the Midwest cluster? She blinked. Fumbled. Well, I mean, it's complicated to get into right now. I stood. I'd be happy to help, I said, stepping toward the stage. Actually, maybe we should replay your thoughts from our initial meeting. I pressed the button. Her voice filled the room, projected clearly. This project is a waste of resources, and I'll make sure everyone knows it was your idea when it fails. The silence was deafening. And I didn't blink. 12 years. That's how long I've worked at Delridge Logistics. Started as a junior data tech, back when half the team still used Excel sheets instead of automated dashboards. I didn't come from a flashy school or some elite grad program. Just a solid degree, a steady drive, and a mind that saw patterns where other people saw numbers. I liked systems. More than that, I understood them. If a process had friction, I wanted to know why. If a metric dipped, I didn't guess, I dug. I didn't work loud. I worked long. Quiet. Consistent. Not the kind of person who got their name on banners, but the kind who made sure the banners went up on time, under budget. I built a reputation, one bit of cleaned up code at a time. And then came Victoria. She transferred into our division 2 years ago from corporate strategy. She had the kind of resume that made HR managers swoon, dual MBA, polished pitch decks, TED-style pauses in meetings. She always spoke in the collective, we decided, or our department believes, but the credit always somehow pointed back to her. At first, I admired her. She was sharp, articulate, and always seemed to know the right language to use in front of leadership. But over time, the cracks showed. She never stayed long in the trenches. Delegated early, disappeared before things got messy. In meetings, she would reference initiatives she barely understood. And every time something went well, she was right there to claim proximity. Never ownership, just closeness. Just enough for the story to shift in her favor. I didn't think much of it. Until my algorithm started working. It began as a side project. I'd been monitoring warehouse inefficiencies across our Midwest distribution chain, trucks sitting too long at cross docks, overstocking in certain sectors, redundancy in routing. Most people chalked it up to logistics noise. But I saw the flaw in the system, manual legacy processes clashing with predictive modules that hadn't been updated since 2016. So I built something. An adaptive model that could track behavior patterns across regions and reallocate resources in real time. I didn't even name it. I just wrote the code, tested it using shadow data, and ran simulations through the dashboard on my lunch breaks. When I finally brought it to Victoria, I thought I was handing her something valuable. She sat back in her chair after the demo and said, "Honestly? It's clever. But it's not realistic. This project is a waste of resources, and I'll make sure everyone knows it was your idea when it fails." That sentence landed hard. Not because I believed her, but because I knew she did. And I knew what would happen if it worked. So before I left the room, I clicked record. Georgia is a one-party consent state. I didn't say anything. Didn't announce it. Just documented the moment. Just in case. Because the thing about systems? They don't break suddenly. They wear down. One unchecked flaw at a time. And I wasn't about to let my work, be buried under someone else's ambition. At first, no one paid attention. The algorithm quietly hummed in the background, running test simulations against archived logistics reports. I didn't roll it out with fanfare. I didn't call it Alexis OS or slap my name on the dashboard. I just tested, refined, and watched it work. And then, it started showing results. I caught a routing conflict in Ohio that had cost us $78,000 over a single quarter. Flagged it, sent a note to operations. They rerouted. The cost dropped by 72% the following cycle. Then came the overstock inefficiency in Tulsa, $312,000 in savings with a single calendar correction. Then a delay cluster in Memphis, where my system reduced driver idle time by 19%. 3 emails. 3 fixes. Over $500,000 saved. Still, I didn't say much. I wasn't in it for attention, I wanted better systems. Cleaner workflows. Less waste. But data talks. By the time word reached upper ops, the savings projection for a full-scale implementation was estimated at $4.3 million annually. That's when Victoria suddenly got interested. She called me into her office on a Monday morning with a tone that was a little too cheerful. "This is exciting," she said. "I've been reviewing your analysis. The predictive model has legs. You've got something real here, Alexis." I watched her over the rim of my coffee cup. "You mean the project you called a waste of resources?" She smiled. Didn't even blink. "Well, I may have been hasty. That's why we have analysts like you, big-picture thinkers. Let's tighten this up and get it ready to present to leadership." I'll need to polish the presentation. You know how the execs are. They need strategy, not code. I nodded slowly. But something in me shifted. This wasn't collaboration. This was collection. She wasn't here to support the idea. She was here to own it. Still, I played along. I sent her sanitized versions of my slide decks. Enough to show the potential, but not the process. I omitted key formulas, kept the regression logic in my private files, and declined to polish the technical sheets beyond readability. She didn't notice. And a week later, the company announced an internal innovation spotlight to showcase game-changing projects led by department heads. My name wasn't mentioned. Only Victoria's. She presented the model I'd built, my charts, my projections, my baseline comparisons, rephrased and reframed as a strategic initiative she had mentored into being. The script was perfect. She gave nods to our team of brilliant analysts, never naming me, never giving enough specifics for anyone to cross-reference. And it worked. Leadership was thrilled. The COO asked if it could be expanded company-wide. The CFO wanted to model the cost avoidance across 3 fiscal years. That Friday, Victoria was nominated for the company's annual Innovation Impact Award. The next Monday, I was asked to support her at the award ceremony. Tech liaison. I would manage the presentation screen, music cues, and slide transitions. I said yes. Not because I wanted to help her, but because she had just handed me the microphone. I didn't rage. I didn't send emails. I didn't gossip at lunch. I documented. I printed the first version of the code. I made backups of the original simulation reports. I compiled a changelog with timestamps, and a digital audit trail showing I had worked on the model for 9 months before her involvement. I archived the original Slack messages. The emails. The meeting calendar invites. And, of course, I kept the recording. It was 10 minutes long. Victoria dismissing the project, calling it doomed. Saying she'd let the blame land where it should when it failed. Admitting she wouldn't put her name on something that soft. It wasn't dramatic. Just clean. Clear. Unfiltered. And perfectly legal. I knew the room would be filled with department heads, media from our industry's trade journal, and senior executives who had known me for over a decade, but had never asked who built the system. Only who presented it best. Now they would hear it for themselves. Not from me. From her. 1 week before the ceremony, she strutted past my desk holding a silk garment bag. "Hope you're ready to run the show," she said with a wink. "I'll be the one in red." I smiled. Because I already had everything I needed. I watched her rehearse the speech twice. She had booked the main auditorium for a run-through 2 days before the ceremony. I stood in the back, dimming the lights, checking the projector feed, pretending not to listen. But I heard every word. She called it my vision. Spoke about pioneering data realignment and strategic behavioral forecasting. She even quoted one of my internal reports, verbatim, but credited it to a multi-departmental brainstorming session. No such session had ever happened. She looked like a leader. She sounded like a visionary. And everyone in that rehearsal space clapped like they believed her. I left early. Not because I was angry, but because I was done hoping she'd course-correct. There wasn't going to be a moment of reflection. No behind-the-scenes apology. No, "Hey Alexis, I should have handled this differently." That version of her didn't exist. She didn't take. She absorbed. And when it was over, there wasn't even a trace of your name left behind. That night, I went home, opened my laptop, and labeled a USB folder. Fall Conference, 2023, Final Slides. Inside it, I placed 2 files. One was the slideshow she'd asked me to cue. The other was the 10-minute recording. It would only take 2 clicks to swap between them. Georgia's one-party consent law made it legal. Her own hubris made it necessary. I wasn't doing this out of revenge. I wasn't doing this for applause. I was doing it because the system only works when someone steps in and says, "No. This part doesn't belong to you." From that moment, I knew, no matter what happened, no matter how this played out, I wasn't going back to the shadows. I was stepping up to the podium. Even if I had to walk through the fire to do it. The ceremony was held in the grand ballroom on the 17th floor. They had it all set up, rows of chairs and symmetrical arcs, a sleek podium with the company logo, floor-length banners celebrating innovation and impact. A spotlight glowed gently over the stage, just warm enough to make the crystal awards shimmer under their velvet cloths. I arrived an hour early. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to run through every technical detail. Slide deck? Loaded. Remote clicker? Synced. Volume levels? Calibrated to perfection. I made sure the AV booth was positioned so I could see the stage, and the screen, clearly. Victoria arrived 20 minutes before showtime, wearing a red sheath dress that hugged every angle and a practiced smile that had clearly been tested in a mirror. She breezed past me without acknowledgement, straight toward the CEO, already surrounded by cameras. She didn't look nervous. Why would she? She thought she'd already won. The room filled quickly. Executives, department heads, media contacts from the industry newsletter, even the founder of the company flew in from New York. There were applause breaks before the event even began. The energy was high. The story had already been written. All that was left was the final scene. I stayed in my seat behind the tech console. Calm. Steady. Thumb on the trackpad. Victoria was the 3rd honoree. The announcer called her name with flourish. The 2023 Innovation Impact Award goes to Victoria Barnes for her groundbreaking leadership in logistics efficiency and predictive resource modeling. The applause swelled as she crossed the stage, accepted the plaque, and shook hands with the COO. Then came the microphone. She tapped it lightly, smiled, and began. "I've always believed innovation isn't just about ideas," she said. "It's about vision. It's about understanding systems, not just what they do, but what they could become." I knew every word. She had rehearsed it down to the commas. I saw an opportunity to rethink the way we handle inefficiencies in our supply chain. I worked closely with analysts and operators to craft a tool that realigns our logistics forecasting. That's when I raised my hand. She paused. The moderator, our VP of HR, smiled politely. "We'll open for questions in just a bit." Victoria waved him off. "No, I'm happy to take one now." She didn't recognize the danger. She never had. I stood. "Victoria, could you walk us through the regression structure behind the fallback module for the Midwest cluster?" The smile cracked just slightly. She blinked. I'd need my notes to explain it properly. It's complex. Would it help if I refreshed your memory?" Before she could reply, I clicked. The projector screen behind her flickered. A new audio file appeared. And her voice filled the ballroom. "This project is a waste of resources, and I'll make sure everyone knows it was your idea when it fails." Silence. Not one breath in the room. Then came her voice again, sarcastic, dismissive. "If you want to sink your time into this, fine. Just don't expect me to back you when it crashes." The audio lasted 97 seconds. Not long. But enough. When it ended, I clicked back to the awards screen. The room was still quiet. Victoria's face had drained of color. She didn't speak. No one did. Finally, the CEO stood. No mic. No fanfare. Just one line. "Victoria, please step down." And she did. No ceremony. No final words. No applause. Just the sound of her heels clicking off the stage. I closed the laptop. Picked up my bag. Walked out of the ballroom and into the hallway, where I leaned against the wall and exhaled for the first time in 2 days. I didn't feel proud. I felt clean. Not vindicated. Not angry. Just restored. Because I hadn't interrupted her speech. I had finished mine. By Monday morning, Victoria's name had disappeared from the project directory. Her calendar access was revoked. Her office light stayed off. Officially, the company said she was transitioning to a role in internal compliance, a position 2 levels down and 3 buildings over, far away from innovation, leadership, or microphones. Unofficially? She was done. They didn't fire her. Corporations rarely do. But they removed her from every committee, stripped her of management responsibilities, and reassigned her to a department where no one cared what blazer she wore or how well she phrased her sentences. That was punishment enough. As for me? The recognition didn't come with trumpets. No grand speech. No standing ovation. It came in the form of a short, quiet email from the COO. Subject: your work. Body: Alexis. Thank you for the clarity and courage you showed last Friday. Your original work has been reviewed, and it's excellent. We'll be correcting the internal records this week. Expect a meeting invite from me directly. And congratulations. M. Later that day, my name was added to the company's press release about the supply chain breakthrough. This time, it said, developed by lead systems analyst Alexis Morgan, the proprietary model is expected to save Delridge Logistics $4.3 million annually. 2 days after that, I was promoted to Director of Systems Innovation. A new title. A new office. And a new rule. Every project moving forward required a documentation trail with named contributors from day one. My name wouldn't get left off again. And neither would anyone else's. The shift wasn't just structural, it was cultural. People started asking before presenting. Giving credit in meetings. Looping analysts into conversations they used to be excluded from. One afternoon, I returned from a leadership meeting to find a small box on my desk. Inside was a single chocolate cupcake with white icing. Piped in dark chocolate across the top were 4 words. "Thanks for recording that." There was no note. No name. Just frosting and truth. I smiled. It wasn't revenge I had tasted that day. It was validation. And it was sweet. I never spoke to Victoria again. She stayed at the company for another 5 months, long enough to fade into the beige background of internal compliance. Last I heard, she took a consulting job somewhere in Dallas. Word travels, though. Quietly, but efficiently. People in our industry remember how a person handles pressure, and how they handle credit. Especially when it wasn't theirs to take. As for me, life didn't transform overnight. But it did shift. I had a team now. 3 analysts under me, each with their own projects, each given full name credit on everything they touched. We don't chase attention, we document. We don't overpromise, we show our work. The first policy I implemented as director was a simple one. If you didn't build it, don't pitch it. It's pinned to the top of every innovation planning document. Not as a threat, but as a truth. Because what happened to me wasn't rare. It was simply well-timed, well-prepared, and not ignored. Some days, I still think about the moment right before I hit play. The fear. The burn in my stomach. That tiny voice in my head that asked if maybe I should just let it go. Stay in my seat. Let her finish her speech. But I didn't. Because if I had, I would have let her define me. And worse, I would have taught everyone watching that it's okay to stay quiet when your name gets erased. That's not a lesson I'm willing to teach. Not to my team. Not to the interns. Not to the next woman who gets called support staff when she built the foundation. People sometimes ask me what I would have done if the recording hadn't worked. If the executives hadn't listened. If she'd still gotten the award. Honestly? I'd still be okay. Because I didn't build that project for applause. I built it because I saw a problem. I solved it. I documented it. And I made it work. The only thing I ever wanted was the truth to be louder than the performance. And in the end, it was. And that's how I learned that being underestimated isn't a weakness, it's a window. When the time comes, you don't need to shout. Just press play. Has someone ever taken credit for your work? Drop your story in the comments. Like this one? Stick around for more true stories of quiet power. And send this to someone who documents everything.